Daniel had been walking through the backyard, his hands shoved deep into his pockets, feeling the cool evening air brush against his face. The day had been long and tiring, filled with the usual small frustrations of life, emails piling up, errands left unfinished, and the quiet loneliness that crept in whenever he was alone in the house. He hadn't planned to go near the garden. It was just a shortcut to the side gate. Yet, as he moved past the flower beds, his eyes caught a soft, warm light glowing in the distance. It came from the old gazebo at the far end of the yard, a place he had once visited often as a child but hadn't thought about in years. The light seemed almost magical, like it was holding a secret it didn't want him to see, and something inside him made him pause. Curiosity pulled him closer, step by careful step, until he was just at the edge of the gazebo. From inside, he could hear faint voices, soft and hesitant, as if two people were sharing something meant to stay private. He recognized the voices immediately. They belonged to his younger brother Elias and his sister Mara. Daniel froze, a sudden tightness in his chest. He hadn't expected to find them there at all, let alone in a moment so intimate and quiet. The gazebo had always been a place of childhood games and laughter, but now it felt different, serious, heavy with emotion, charged with a tension he hadn't seen in either of them before. Elias was holding something in his hands, a folded letter that he gripped so tightly his knuckles turned white. Daniel noticed the slight tremor in his fingers and the way his shoulders hunched slightly, as though carrying a weight far greater than his age should allow. Mara stood close, her face calm on the surface, but her eyes betrayed the truth. They were wet with unshed tears, the corners glistening under the soft glow of the lantern hanging inside the gazebo. Her hand reached out, brushing lightly against Elias's arm in a gesture of comfort, a silent message of reassurance. Daniel could feel the power of that small touch, the way it connected them without words, and he felt a pang of something deep and indescribable, perhaps longing, perhaps a sharp ache of memory, perhaps the awareness that he was witnessing something private, something significant, something that could change everything. The words Elias whispered were almost inaudible at first, carried more in the quiet of the evening than in sound. "I don't know how to tell him," he murmured, his voice barely above the breeze rustling through the trees. Daniel's heart twisted. Who was him? He could only guess, but the intensity in Elias's tone suggested this was important, life-changing even. Mara's response was quiet but firm, filled with a wisdom and patience that seemed beyond her years. "You don't have to tonight," she said softly, her hand still resting on his arm. Her words were meant to soothe, to delay a confrontation, but to Daniel they hinted at a story deeper than any he had imagined. He wanted to turn away, to give them their space, but something rooted him in place. He had a strange mix of emotions, a desire to know, a fear of intrusion, and a sudden understanding that whatever was happening in that gazebo wasn't something small or trivial. He could feel it in the way the light illuminated their faces, the careful way they avoided speaking too loudly, the almost sacred hush of their presence. The gazebo, once a place of innocent games, had become a theater for vulnerability, the hidden truths, for the moments that define lives quietly but forever. Daniel's foot shifted on a loose floorboard, and the faint creak sliced through the night. The moment shattered. Elias looked up, startled, his eyes wide, and Mara's hand froze in midair. Both siblings turned toward the sound, their faces registering a mixture of surprise, concern, and the unspoken recognition that Daniel had seen them. For a brief instant, Daniel felt the weight of their gaze as if it were a physical force, a pull of attention that made him acutely aware of his intrusion. Yet there was no anger, No hostility, just an unspoken question hanging between them. How much had he seen? How much did he now know? The night air seemed thicker, charged with the electricity of the moment. Daniel could feel the beating of his own heart as he stepped forward, unsure whether to apologize, to retreat, or to simply stay and witness. He had stumbled into a delicate scene, one where words had failed them before, and might fail him too. He noticed the small details, the way Mara's hair caught the lantern light, the subtle tremor in Elias's lips, the letter folded so carefully that it seemed almost ceremonial, a tangible representation of their fears and secrets. Every element spoke to him, and yet the meaning remained just out of reach, like a puzzle he was not yet ready to solve. He remembered times from his childhood when the gazebo had been a sanctuary, a place where laughter and joy were free, where secrets were shared lightly and without consequence. Tonight was nothing like that. Tonight it held the weight of the adult world, unspoken worries, complicated feelings, and decisions that could not be reversed. Daniel realized with a strange mixture of awe and anxiety that this was a turning point, not just for his siblings, but for himself as well. To see them like this, vulnerable yet strong, careful yet desperate, was a reminder of how fleeting innocence was. How quickly childhood spaces could become stages for the complexity of grown-up life. The light flickered softly, casting shadows that danced across the wooden walls of the gazebo. Daniel's presence was a ripple through their delicate balance, and he understood with sudden clarity that this moment was fragile. Any movement, any word could change it forever. He felt a surge of protectiveness, a desire to support, to understand, to hold steady in the face of whatever storm was brewing inside those walls. Yet there was also an undeniable pull of curiosity, the human instinct to know, to connect, to bridge the gap between hidden truths and revealed ones. He wanted to ask questions, but he wanted to do so gently, carefully, in a way that honored the trust that was already unspoken between them. As he lingered at the edge of the gazebo, Daniel realized that life often handed us glimpses of truth unexpectedly, in moments that are quiet but profound. The moment he stumbled upon in the soft lantern light was one of those rare instances where ordinary routines and familiar places became infused with meaning and emotion. He understood that this was more than a simple secret. It was a reflection of the bonds they shared, the fears they carried, and the ways they navigated the challenges of growing up and facing responsibilities together. The letter in Elias's hand, the tremor in his voice, Mara's careful touch, all of it spoke to love, loyalty, and the weight of choices that must be made without certainty of outcome. And then, with a soft but distinct creak beneath his foot, Daniel's world shifted. Their eyes met his. A silent acknowledgement of the intrusion, a question suspended in the night. Now that he had seen, what would he do? The answer was not simple, and yet he knew, deep in his heart, that he could not simply turn away. The night had opened a door, and the path forward would lead them all into uncharted territory, where secrets, emotions, and family ties would collide in ways that none of them could predict. The light in the gazebo flickered again, steady now, as if inviting him in, as if signaling that this was just the beginning of a story none of them could have imagined, a story that would test their hearts, their loyalty, and their capacity to love each other fully despite the challenges ahead. Daniel stepped slowly into the gazebo, his presence careful and deliberate. The soft light from the lantern above illuminated the worried faces of Elias and Mara, casting gentle shadows that moved with the subtle flicker. The tension was tangible, like the air itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to break. Daniel's chest tightened as he realized just how serious this moment was. His siblings had been carrying something heavy, something they hadn't shared with him, and now it was finally laid bare, at least partially. He felt the pull of empathy, the desire to help, and the inevitable curiosity of someone who suddenly understood that his family's lives were far more complicated than he had thought. Elias, still clutching the folded letter, looked away. His jaw was tight, and his shoulders bore the weight of the secret he had tried so hard to manage alone. "You weren't supposed to see this," he said, his voice strained but not angry. Daniel felt the sting of guilt, knowing he had accidentally intruded into a private moment. Yet, at the same time, he felt a surge of determination to be present, to listen, to understand. "See what?" he asked softly, careful not to provoke defensiveness, careful to keep the fragile trust intact. Mara took a deep breath and stepped closer to her brother, then glanced at Daniel. "We're losing the house," she said simply, the words landing like stones in the quiet night. Daniel's heart skipped a beat, the weight of reality crashing over him. He had suspected financial troubles before, small hints here and there, unpaid bills, worried glances, the hurried explanations that never fully satisfied him. But hearing it out loud from his siblings' mouths made it real, immediate, and frightening. He noticed the tremor in Elias's hands as he held the letter. This was the final notice from the bank, the moment where the world of responsibility collided with the world of hope. Mara continued, her voice calm but edged with strain. She explained how their mother had left debts behind, how their father was no longer able to manage the household finances, and how Elias had been taking late-night shifts and extra work to try to fix something that was never meant to be his burden. Daniel listened, absorbing every detail, feeling the pulse of stress and worry that had been quietly threading through his siblings' lives. Each word carried weight, a mixture of fear, courage, and love that Daniel could see in their expressions. He could see the exhaustion in Elias's posture, the way he leaned slightly, as if each word cost him energy, and the resolve in Mara's eyes, the quiet determination to protect her brother and the home they loved. Daniel realized that this was more than just financial trouble. It was about loyalty, responsibility, and the unspoken promises they had made to each other. He felt a pang in his chest, love mixed with regret. He had been so consumed with his own life, his own frustrations, and his own heartbreaks that he hadn't noticed the struggles of those closest to him. Now, standing in the gazebo, he felt both the weight of his guilt and the urgent need to act. He wanted to reach out, to hold them, to tell them it would be okay, even though he didn't know yet how it could be. Mara's hand rested lightly on Elias's arm, a gentle reassurance that needed no words. Daniel's eyes followed the movement, and he felt a surge of admiration for her strength. She was young, but in that moment, she carried a depth of responsibility that seemed far beyond her years. Daniel realized that both of them had been protecting each other for years, shielding one another from worry, carrying burdens silently so no one else would feel the weight. He felt a growing respect for the resilience they had shown, but also a sharp ache of empathy for the sacrifices they had made quietly, almost invisibly. He stepped closer, letting the lantern light illuminate his own face. "We can figure this out," he said softly, wanting to provide comfort, but also unsure if he had the right words. Elias's eyes met his, a mixture of hope and doubt flickering in their depths. "It's not that simple," Elias said, his voice low, almost broken. Daniel nodded, understanding that some problems couldn't be solved by words alone. Some needed plans, effort, and time, but his presence here, in the middle of the gazebo, was a first step toward facing them together. As they stood in the soft glow, Daniel noticed the tension in Mara's face begin to ease slightly. She turned toward him, vulnerability visible in her eyes. We thought maybe we could fix it without telling you, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel felt the quiet weight of her words. It wasn't that they had wanted to exclude him, it was that they had been trying to shield him from worry. They had been protecting him emotionally, keeping the pain contained so that he wouldn't have to carry any additional burden. And now, the truth was out, unfiltered and raw, and they were all facing it together. Elias finally spoke, breaking the silence that had hung between them like a fragile thread. I've been trying to handle everything on my own, he admitted, his voice tinged with both pride and exhaustion. I didn't want to drag you into it. Daniel felt the impact of those words deeply. He knew the strength it took for his younger brother to bear so much alone. And he also felt a surge of frustration at himself for not noticing sooner. But more than anything, he felt the warmth of family, the bond that had kept them connected through childhood, and now, in this quiet lantern-lit moment, still held them together despite the uncertainty surrounding them. Mara's hand moved from Elias's arm to lightly touch Daniel's shoulder, a gesture that bridged the gap of silence. It was a silent acknowledgement of his support, a signal that they were no longer hiding anything from him, that his presence was both welcome and necessary. Daniel felt a wave of emotion, a mixture of pride, love, and determination. He knew that no matter how difficult the path ahead might be, they would face it together. The house, the debts, the uncertainty, all of it would require courage and cooperation. But for the first time that evening, Daniel sensed a quiet hope. The night outside the gazebo felt still, almost reverent, as if acknowledging the weight of the conversation inside. The air was filled with the scent of the garden, fresh grass, blooming flowers, and the faint earthy aroma of evening dew. Daniel took a deep breath, letting the tranquility of the garden seep into him, grounding him amidst the flood of emotions. The letter in Elias's hand, the trembling in his siblings' voices, and the soft touch of Mara's hand, all of it reminded him that life was complicated, that love and support could make even the heaviest burdens bearable. In that quiet space, Daniel realized that some truths had to be shared, some fears had to be faced, and some decisions could no longer be postponed. His siblings had shown incredible courage by revealing part of their struggle, and now it was his turn to respond, not with judgment, but with understanding and commitment. He knew the night was far from over, that more challenges awaited them. But the first step had been taken. Together, standing in the gentle glow of the gazebo, they had begun to confront the reality they could no longer ignore. And in that fragile, unspoken moment, Daniel felt the bonds of family grow stronger, ready to face whatever came next. The night had grown quiet around the gazebo. The soft glow of the lantern flickered gently, painting warm, golden tones across Daniel, Elias, and Mara. The earlier tension had settled into a heavy silence, one that held the weight of decisions, unspoken feelings, and the uncertainty of the future. Daniel had stayed close to his siblings, letting them breathe, giving them space to process, yet his presence was steady and grounding. He could feel the subtle shift in the air, the way the quiet demanded honesty, how unspoken truths were hovering, waiting to be released. He knew that the moment he had stumbled upon earlier was just the beginning. There was more they hadn't said, more that Mara and Elias were holding deep inside, and he was determined to hear it before the night ended. Finally, breaking the silence, Daniel stepped closer and spoke in a low, gentle voice. Mara, what else aren't you telling me? His words were careful, not demanding, but filled with concern. Mara looked away, her gaze drifting to the dark silhouette of the trees beyond the garden. For a moment she didn't answer, the quiet stretching longer than Daniel expected. Then she spoke, her voice trembling slightly, yet steady with determination. I'm leaving, she said. The words hit like a sudden gust of wind, sharp yet inevitable. Elias froze, the color draining from his face. "You said you'd wait," he said, his tone a mix of shock and pleading. Mara shook her head gently, tears glistening at the corner of her eyes. "I can't. If I stay, I'll never move forward. I have to go." Her words carried a quiet heartbreak, the kind that pierces not through anger, but through longing and the ache of impossible choices. Daniel's heart tightened. He felt a mix of empathy, pride, and sorrow all at once. He understood the meaning behind her decision. Mara was young, but she had always been fiercely independent, always striving for more than what life had handed her. He could see it now, clear as day, the struggle between loyalty to her family and her own desire for freedom, for love, for a life that was entirely her own. The quiet bravery in her eyes, the way she spoke without hesitation despite the tears, told Daniel that she had already made up her mind. This wasn't an impulsive choice. It was a carefully considered step into the unknown, one that she felt she could not delay any longer. Elias's face was tight with frustration and worry, his hands clenching the letter as if holding it could somehow keep her from leaving. "But the house," he began, then stopped, realizing that words were futile against the force of her resolve. Daniel stepped closer to Elias, placing a hand on his shoulder in reassurance. "We'll manage," he said firmly. "Together. No one has to carry this alone anymore." Elias looked at him, doubt still flickering in his eyes, but the subtle nod that followed hinted at a fragile trust. For the first time that evening, he seemed willing to share the weight, to let his brother in, to stop carrying the burden alone. Mara turned to face Daniel fully, her expression softening. She was vulnerable, yet there was strength in her vulnerability. "I didn't want to hurt you," she whispered. "Or him," she added, glancing at Elias. Daniel shook his head gently. "You're not hurting us," he said. "We love you. That's all that matters." Her eyes shone with unshed tears, and in that moment the distance between responsibility and desire, between family and personal dreams, felt both unbearable and beautiful. Daniel realized that love sometimes meant letting go, sometimes meant supporting choices that scared you, sometimes meant trusting that the bonds between people were stronger than circumstance. The gazebo seemed to embrace them, the soft glow of the lantern a quiet witness to their confessions. Daniel noticed the subtle details, the way Mara's hand lingered briefly on her brother's arm, the way Elias's shoulders gradually relaxed, the way the garden outside seemed still, as if giving them permission to face their truths. He understood that life often demanded moments like this, moments of reckoning where honesty and courage intersected, where bonds were tested and strengthened. He also realized that he had been given a privilege to see the depth of his siblings' hearts, to understand their struggles, their desires, and their fears. Mara took a step closer to Elias, her voice gentle. "I wish things were different," she said. Daniel could feel the weight of that longing. It was not about money or responsibility, it was about choices, love, and the desire to live a life fully, without regret. Elias looked down, silent for a moment, then met her eyes. There was sorrow, yes, but also acceptance beginning to form. "I want you to be happy," he said quietly, "even if it's hard for me." Daniel felt a lump in his throat. The love between them was clear, unspoken but unshakable. The kind of love that could survive distance, change, and heartbreak because it was rooted in trust and family. Daniel took a deep breath, feeling the cool evening air fill his lungs. He thought about the struggles that had brought them here, the house, the unpaid bills, the burdens each sibling had quietly carried alone. But now, facing each other honestly, there was hope. There was a plan waiting to be formed, a path that, required effort, courage, and commitment, but they would walk it together. Daniel felt a surge of determination. Whatever came next, they would meet it as a family, each carrying the other when needed, each offering support and love freely, without judgment. As the night deepened, the trio sat down on the wooden floor of the gazebo, the lantern casting gentle shadows across their faces. Conversation flowed more easily now, not about blame or mistakes, but about possibilities. Daniel suggested small solutions, ways they could manage the house, reach out to support networks, and tackle the financial challenges step by step. Elias listened. Mara nodded occasionally, and for the first time that evening, all three felt the weight of fear lifting slightly, replaced with a cautious hope. It was a moment of quiet triumph, a subtle victory over uncertainty, and it strengthened the bond between them in ways words alone could not convey. Finally, Mara stood, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. "I have to go," she repeated. But this time there was no desperation, only resolve. Elias nodded, accepting, and Daniel offered a small, reassuring smile. "Go," he said softly, "and know that we're behind you, always." Mara's eyes glistened, and she took a step back. Then another, moving toward the path that led out of the garden, toward the life she had chosen. Daniel and Elias watched her disappear into the distance, the glow of the gazebo fading behind her, leaving a sense of calm and completeness in its wake. The night had begun with uncertainty, tension, and unspoken secrets, but it ended with understanding, trust, and quiet courage. Daniel knew challenges awaited them: fixing the house, supporting Mara from afar, navigating the future, but he also knew they were no longer alone in facing them. The honesty, the confessions, the fragile yet powerful love between siblings had created a foundation strong enough to weather anything. He felt a sense of peace, knowing that sometimes the hardest truths bring the greatest growth, and the bonds of family, when nurtured with care and empathy, can overcome